On the morning of July 7th, 2016, a Canadian national walked into a branch of Standard Chartered Bank in Singapore. He approached the female teller and calmly slides a handwritten note across the counter to the teller. She looks at the note and then handed over 30,000 Singaporean dollars to the man. He took the cash and calmly walked out of the door before disappearing into the busy streets. And just like that, a single man successfully pulled off a bank robbery in one of the safest nations on earth. This is the story of David Roach, a man who robbed the bank with only a piece of paper. David Roach, an engineering student who had been backpacking across Asia since 2015, arrived in Singapore on the 29th of June 2016. 26-year-old David Roach had no prior criminal record when he arrived in the country. However, this was about to change. You see, Mr. Roach was not in the country just for tourism. He had something else in mind. Over the coming days, he blended in with the crowd, booking hostels, wandering the streets. But underneath the surface, he wasn't just wandering. He was exploring and observing the surroundings, gathering information about a branch of Standard Chartered Bank in Holland Village. Now let me tell you something. Singapore is one of the safest countries on earth. Bank robberies are very rare in the country. In fact, the last successful bank robbery was way back in 2004. Singapore is widely regarded as a safe and secure country, with elite police force, strict laws, and a vast network of surveillance cameras capturing every part of the country. Now, within this security fortress lies Holland Village, a trendy affluent city with a vast number of cafes, boutiques, and expats. A place where people expect not only to feel safe, but to be safe and secure. And right in the middle of Holland Village sits a branch of Standard Chartered Bank, a bank with a modest security presence. The general consensus was that no one robs a bank in Singapore, so no need for a heavy security presence. But David Roach saw something else. In the midst of all the relaxed security measures, he saw an opportunity to make some money. He spent the next few days carefully studying the bank operations, memorizing employee routines. He identified every weakness and vulnerability. He mapped out potential escape routes. It wasn't a reckless act, but a carefully planned operation. He tried to disguise his movements by constantly swapping hostels. He tried not to attract attention to himself and completely stayed unpredictable. Then on Thursday, July 7th, 2016, the Standard Chartered Bank branch in Holland Village was operating at full capacity just like every other day. It was around 11:25 a.m. in one of the safest neighborhoods in Singapore. David Roach entered the bank dressed in a grey sweater and a cap. He was calm and composed, nothing out of the ordinary. He waited in line just like every other customers. And when it was his turn, he calmly walked to the female teller, who was pregnant at the time. He placed a bag on the counter, with his right hand inside the bag. He handed the teller a note which reads, "This is a robbery. I have a gun in my bag. Don't shout. Just put the money in the bag." The teller, fearing for her life, complied with Mr. Roach's request, counted 30,000 Singaporean dollars from her drawer, put it in a bag. There was no alarm. It was just like every other routine transaction. Mr. Roach took the bag and calmly left the bank. In many countries around the world, where there are constant threats of a bank heist, security will be very tight. Silent alarms would have been triggered, alerting the authorities to secure every exit point, and police units would immediately be dispatched to the affected area. But in a country like Singapore, where bank heists are not common, there would definitely be security lapses. And by the time the authorities were alerted, Roach had already left the bank. After leaving the bank, he went to a nearby alleyway, changed his outfit in order to disguise his look, before going to the cafe, where he bought a slice of cake and a bottle of water, like nothing had happened. He spent roughly 6 minutes at the cafe. From there, he boarded a taxi. The taxi brought him back to his hostel, where he collected his personal belongings and left for Changi Airport. At the airport, he boarded an Air Asian aircraft that was going to Bangkok and left Singapore at 2:40 p.m. that same day. Within hours of the robbery, Singaporean authorities had built a comprehensive profile of the suspect. Multiple surveillance cameras from the bank the cafe, and the adjoining streets, had captured several images of Roach as he left the bank and made his way back to his hostel. These images were enhanced by a digital forensic team, making it easier to identify the suspects. The images were then circulated across regional law enforcement agencies. Roach successfully entered Thailand, but 2 days later he was arrested. On the 9th of July 2016, just 2 days after the robbery, Thai police, acting on intelligence from Singaporean authorities, stormed the backpacker hostel in Bangkok. There they found the 26-year-old still in possession of the stolen money. After Roach was arrested, Thailand authorities cancelled his right to stay in the country and placed him in an immigration detention center. Singapore requested for Roach to be repatriated back to the country, but there was a problem. You see, Singapore and Thailand had no extradition treaty, so the request was rejected. The Canadian government also tried to have Roach extradited to Canada, as Canada and Thailand had an existing extradition treaty in place. But instead, the Thailand authorities decided to prosecute Roach under its own laws. Roach was charged for currency violation and money laundering, as he failed to declare more than 20,000 Singaporean dollars in cash when he entered the country. He was sentenced to 28 months in prison, but was later reduced to 14 months after he confessed to the money laundering charges. The Thailand government also confiscated the total sum of $30,000, leaving Roach with nothing for his troubles. In January of 2018, Roach regained his freedom after serving out his sentence in Thailand. As he was being deported back to Canada, he was placed on a multi-legged flight. While on a stopover at Heathrow Airport in London, he was arrested by British authorities, as the arrest warrant placed on him by the Singaporean authorities was still active. Upon his arrest, the Singaporean authorities requested for his extradition back to Singapore, but Roach challenged the extradition in court. His legal team argued against the extradition back to Singapore, citing corporal punishment that can be meted out to him, where Roach will be subjected to flogging. But the Singaporean authorities promised their British counterparts that Roach would not face any corporal punishment if he's found guilty. Roach was finally extradited to Singapore in March of 2020, after he lost his appeal. In Singapore, Roach was charged with robbing a bank and taking criminal proceeds out of the country. And on July 7, 2021, exactly 5 years after robbing a branch of Standard Chartered Bank, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison after pleading guilty to the charges. He was also sentenced to 6 strokes of cane. However, the president of Singapore at the time, Halimah Yacob, granted Roach clemency and remitted his caning sentence, thereby fulfilling the promise made to the British government.